Morning, everybody. Just a sound check again. Be with you in a few minutes' time. Just admitting more people into the session. Thank you. Well, there we go. Good morning, everybody. It is today, the 23rd of August, 2023. And it's so great seeing everybody online. We're looking forward to a great Transport Forum event today, proudly hosted by South African Association of Freight Forwarders, Road Freight Association, and Ctrack. And yeah, so let's do a little bit housekeeping while we're admitting more people. So I think you all know the game by now, but please keep yourselves on mute. You're welcome to make use of the chat room to ask questions to the panelists. During the Q&A session at the end, we will then have a look at those questions, or during the Q&A at the end, you'll be given opportunity to unmute yourself, and then once recognized, we will allow you to ask your question to the panelists. So we will not encourage questions during the presentations. Yeah, the chat room, you're welcome to use the chat room. You're welcome to network, meet each other. Please keep the conversations related to the event, but you're welcome to share contact details and network in the chat room. You're most welcome to do that. So, yeah, ladies and gents, let's have a look at our program then for today. The theme we're looking at today is the practical side of data, and it's such a relevant topic for the world we live in today. And we've got learned presenters going to tell us more about this. And you can see the program there. We're going to have Craig, apologies for this. Dr. Unita Maria, who was supposed to do the opening address. She unfortunately contracted the bad virus in the Uganda visit, and she's still very ill. So we pray that she will have a speedy recovery. So Jace Lane from Craig agreed to do the industry overview on her behalf. So thank you, Jace, for doing that. So after that, then also we will have Eugene van Niekerk from Ctrack. We'll do the value of understanding data. We'll have Gavin Kelly, CEO of RFA, talk about using data to remain stable and relevant. We'll take a short comfort break. And then we will have, and we decided potentially we're going to swap the last two presentations. It will make more logical sense. So we will have Lisa and Jacob present about the visibility in the logistics network, and thereafter we will have Kelly Lane from Craig will do a case study for us on stat data. And then we'll have the panel discussion, questions and answers. So, ladies and gents, this is a great program. What we're going to do now is we want to give recognition to our stakeholders, so making the Transport Forum possible. As you might know, the Transport Forum is already more than 16 years old, so it's quite some time that we've been running this forum. And so let's give recognition, but there will be a little bit fun here, and that is that we will do a quiz. So you should listen carefully. And after I've introduced you to our stakeholders, we will ask questions about our stakeholders, 2 questions. And the first person answering the question right in the chat room, he or she will be the winner of that prize, and will have the prize couriered to you. So we'll obviously obtain your delivery address afterwards. So listen carefully, and you might be the lucky winner of these prizes. Also, as we usually do, ladies and gents, the stakeholder companies, I usually say something about our great stakeholders and our sponsors and alliance partners and so on. If you feel you want to say a few words yourself on your company, you're welcome to interrupt me, and then you can say a few words as well. So, so let's have a look. Let me just get my screen sorted out here. All right, so we have formal associations that's part of the Transport Forum, and we're going to quickly have a look at each one of them and formal agreements. Obviously, many other associations are also involved, but not in a formal scenario as these. So let's have a look at one of our hosting organizations today, South African Association of Freight Forwarders. You can see they've got core values: member-centric service, acting with integrity in the best interest of the industry, lead with courage in a disrupted environment, enable and encourage change. Right, so you can see they've already been established in 1921. The National Association of Members throughout the Republic of South Africa. And I think the last paragraph that says it all, we call the freight forwarder the architect of the supply chain. Globalization and the need to reduce cost over the entire supply chain have refocused the freight forwarder in ways that are innovative and functional. So thank you, SAAFF, for the great work and support you're giving the Transport Forum. South African Express Parcel Association represented the body and the voice of the express delivery industry in South Africa, comprised of member companies engaged in express freight and courier industry. Thank you very much, SAAFF. The Road Freight Association, Kevin Kelly is one of our presenters. He will tell you more about them just now. As you can see, they're saying that without trucks, South Africa stops. And different verticals like green, smart, safe, legal, and freight. So yeah, if you're in a road freight industry and you're not a member of this company or association, you're actually losing out big time. Then we've got ARIA, as they say. ARIA is the African Rail Industry Association, the preeminent body of South Africa representing players in the railway industry. So they've got a mission to bring in third-party access to the country's railway network, and they're doing great work in this sense. So thank you very much, ARIA, for the work you're doing. So then we've got SABOA, the South African Bus Operators Association. So they also in the week of 5th and 6th September, they've got their convention at Nasrec. So you can obviously find your links on the Transport Forum's website for all these organizations. But you can see SABOA was formed already in 1980 by 5 leading bus companies at the time. Today, they represent about 70% of the public transport bus and coach fleet. So great. Thank you very much, SABOA, for your support. All right, we also have formal alliances with media houses. You can see here Freight News, Railways Africa, and Engineering News. Let's quickly have a look at each one of them. So Freight News by Freight and Trading Weekly. You can see they've got news and features for import-export decision makers. And ladies and gents, you need to subscribe to these magazines. Otherwise, you're definitely losing out. And the content they're providing is really great. I'm very much dependent on the content I get from these magazines. So that is Freight News. Railways Africa magazine published weekly online. You can see that's all about rail infrastructure. Get your information about rail infrastructure. We've got Engineering News from Creamer Media, and they usually share a video with us summarizing the week's highlights. So let's have a look at the video they shared with us.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Engineering News and Mining Weekly magazine, published on Friday, 18 August 2023. In this week's cover article, Engineering News and Mining Weekly contributing editor online Tasneem Bulbulia unpacks South Africa's consideration of the design for a sustainable automotive industry. South Africa's automotive manufacturing sector is widely regarded as a success story. However, it must now bolster local demand and adapt its policies and initiatives amid a weak domestic growth outlook and the global, albeit uneven, shift towards new energy vehicles. The Engineering News features focus on the Southern African Institute of Steel Construction, where the local steel industry is in prime springboard position, and Materials Handling and Logistics, where an annual materials handling conference was well represented. The Mining Weekly features focus on Australian mining, where an explorer diversifies with a Guinea iron project, and New Mining Technologies, where automating mines improves safety. This week's business leader is William Jogan, the president of the South African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy and a partner at SRK Consulting. And as this week's cartoon shows, while some Eskom power stations are operating more stably and various private generation projects are offering some relief, load shedding continues to weigh down the real economy. We hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Creamer Media's Engineering News and Mining Weekly. Be sure to subscribe to the magazine that offers you in-depth news about developments in the real economy by emailing subscriptions@engineeringnews.co.za. Happy reading and see you next time.
Thank you, Engineering News, for a great summary of the week's news. Ladies and gents, we've got Ctrack, who's also the platinum sponsor of the Transport Forum since actually inception of the Transport Forum. And you can see they're leading global software as a service and a big data company for vehicle tracking, fleet management, and insurance telematics solutions. But they actually shared with us a video of a very great new solution they have in the industry. So thank you, Ctrack, for this one.
A lot has changed in the 4 decades that we've been keeping vehicles and business equipment safe and always visible. And we've learned a thing or two along the way. That's why our focus is firmly on the future. A future that goes beyond just tracking and reporting, challenging the status quo, and exploring what the power of technology combined with AI can unlock for your business. Because talking did not earn us the reputation of being the leader in fleet telematics solutions. Pushing boundaries with constant innovation did, and putting our customers first by asking, what if, what's next, and what's possible? For the power of foresight over hindsight to plan ahead and make smarter decisions. What if you could predict the optimal route to increase on-time deliveries and significantly reduce long-term maintenance? What if you could predict the best tractor speed on the day to reduce wasted spray and cover more ground with precision? Or if something as trivial as a few centimeters could predict the difference between maximum efficiency or maximum risk? Because in our world, and likely in yours too, having insights that can be used as foresight with a crystal clear view of the future is the only thing that matters to remain ahead for better control, better efficiencies, and better overall performance. It's the telematics and AI solution that goes beyond tracking and reporting. Step into the future with Crystal by Ctrack and experience the power to predict.
Thank you so much, Ctrack. Crystal, surely a good product for better decision making. Thank you very much, Ctrack, for that one. Ladies and gents, we've got Bid Air Cargo. It's a leading cargo airline providing express airport-to-airport solutions and related services to the courier and express logistics industry, also a proud gold sponsor of the Transport Forum.
In the world of express freight, there's one name that stands above the rest: Bid Air Cargo. Our airport-to-airport line haul service is the backbone of South Africa's express freight industry. At Bid Air Cargo, we don't just deliver cargo, we go the extra mile to ensure a seamless and efficient experience in South Africa. With our unwavering commitment to excellence and improved technology, we handle your cargo with utmost care and deliver it on time, every time. Our dedication to service excellence is what sets us apart. We live by our core values of service excellence, mutual respect, integrity, and accountability. When you choose Bid Air Cargo, you're choosing a partner that takes pride in going above and beyond for your freight needs. From pharmaceuticals to perishable goods, automotive parts to live animal transportation, we handle a diverse range of commodities. Our attention to detail and precision ensure that your cargo arrives in perfect condition, no matter what it is. Our dedicated teams work tirelessly to guarantee the safety and efficient transport of your cargo. We leave no stone unturned to ensure your freight arrives at its destination intact and on time. With our advanced track and trace system, you can monitor your shipments in real time. Stay informed about the whereabouts of your cargo with just a few clicks. Our goal is to provide you with peace of mind and complete transparency throughout the entire journey. We understand that time is of the essence for our valued customers. That's why we offer a user-friendly online portal that simplifies the documentation process. Obtain quotations and create e-labels with ease, saving you valuable time and effort. Whether you have a small package or a large shipment, Bid Air Cargo handles it all with equal care and precision. Our ISO certification is a testament to our commitment to quality and professionalism. We don't just excel in domestic express freight, we also cater to your international cargo needs. No matter the size of your business, whether you're a small enterprise or a multinational corporation, you can trust us to handle your cargo with the same level of dedication and attention to detail. Connect with us today and discover the difference our innovative technology, seamless tracking, and customer-oriented approach will make to your operation. Bid Air Cargo. Same-day express every day, overnight express every night.
Thank you, Bid Air Cargo. Ladies and gents, we've also got University of Johannesburg, actually part also of the Transport Forum since inception. They've got the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management, also the Institute for Transport and Logistics Studies. You can see they, since 1968 already, developed programs that allow diverse educational backgrounds to specialize in logistics management, transport management, and transport economics. Thank you very much, University of Johannesburg, for your gold sponsorship. Global Trade Solution, innovative solutions transforming global supply chain. You can see the verticals, consulting and strategy, software solutions, and specialized services. And it's all about imports and exports. So ladies and gents, yeah, good organization to be associated with. Pegasus, changing lives, changing worlds. In South Africa, we leverage our sector-leading expertise and experience to craft and implement mobility solutions which work and have substantial impact. You can see the disciplinary strategic management consulting groups focusing on cities, climate, energy, resilience, transport, waste, and water. Thank you, Pegasus, for your great sponsorship. Unitron Supply Chain Solutions, innovation, expertise delivered. See, they are a leading provider of integrated transportation, warehousing, and supply chain-based services to customers of a variety of needs, offering bespoke value propositions in each segment. Thank you very much, Unitrans. JC Auditors, it's all about certification, compliance, one solution. They are a SANA's accredited certification body providing internationally recognized certifications. Thank you very much, JC Auditors, for your sponsorship. Here we've got Professional Risk Asset Management. See, they provide risk management solutions in logistics, warehousing, and distribution. There you can see the services and the products, RFID solutions, speaking trolleys, all wearable solutions, artificial intelligence wearable solutions, warehouse soft automation, and pallet socks. So thank you very much, Professional Risk Asset Management, for your gold sponsorship. EasyClear, leading software provider for the customs and clearing industry. So you can see their software solution for customs clearing, freight forwarding, and logistics providers covering air, sea, road, and rail. Thank you very much, EasyClear. TicketPro Travel is the online booking tool, ticketprotravel.co.za. For all your corporate booking needs, you can use TicketPro Travel. You can see they say no contracts, no hidden fees, just good business with straightforward, fair pricing. Thank you very much, TicketPro Travel. From the same group, we've got TicketPro SmartTab. So this SmartTab solution includes key features like comprehensive route management, flexible passenger payment methods, flexible route and fare product setup, shift and dispatch management, cashier system, inspection tools, and comprehensive management information system reports. Thank you very much, TicketPro SmartTab. Zutari, consulting engineers of note. You can see they're talking about impact engineered. Ctrack also, well, previously known as Oricon, they've been involved with Transport Forum for many years as a gold sponsor. So thank you very much, Ctrack, for your kind support. Kuba, they transforming ticketing as part of the ICM Mobility Group, which enables public and private transport to move into the digital era. As you can see, they're talking about journey planning, smart ticketing, streamlining electronic payment, shaping the digital transformation of the mobility sector. So their ticketing solutions have been successfully implemented in over 100 cities and regions worldwide, dealing with millions of daily transactions. so they know mobility. Thank you very much. Kubo. Standard Bank. Over 160 years of experience, they believe that dreams matter and that together we can make them a reality. Really thankful to Standard Bank for their gold sponsorship. They're also very much involved in the road transport management system. So Standard Bank, thank you very much for your kind support. Yes, we just want to bring under your attention the Smarter Mobility Africa Summit. This is a paid advert from them. It will take place from 1st to 3rd of October at the Gallagher Convention Center in Johannesburg. Definitely worth your while to attend this summit. And obviously you'll get all the links to these events on the Transport Forum's website. I'll give you the website address just now. Also the Road Freight SME Summit, you can see it's from the 20th to the 21st of October, Transport Month, at the Maslow Hotel in Sandton. So book your ticket as soon as possible to avoid disappointment. Thank you very much, SME Summit. So ladies and gents, those were our sponsors, and now it's time for fun for our quiz, and you might be the lucky winner of one of these two prizes. So let's see. Obviously, if you're an employee of one of the companies being the answer of the quiz, then do not partake. Let's have the other people then see if they can remember what we've said. So those are our sponsors, right? And alliance partners and media partners. And I'm going to ask a question now, and you should then, get your chat room ready. I'm doing it on my side as well. And the first person answering the question right will be the winner of the prize. So the first question, here it comes. What is the name of the new Ctrack solution? JC Lane, there you go. Congratulations. So let me just make a note here. Congratulations, JC Lane. That was very sharp and very fast. All right, let's get ready for the next question. So, JC Lane, you're a winner of the lantern. All right, now the question for the nice branded Transport Forum power bank. And here is the question. Let me just get my screen right here. You can follow, right. A question, which bank is a sponsor of the Transport Forum with over 160 years of experience? There we go. That was a fast one. Let me just go back to the first one. So the winner here was Angela. Angela, congratulations. You're the winner of that one. So let me just make a note here. Right, congratulations to our winners. That was actually very sharp and fast. And we're still admitting more people into the session here. Ladies and gents, I want to draw your attention also to the business directory of the Transport Forum. It's been administered by Olga Mashilu. It's one of our BEE initiatives. The entire business directory has been outsourced to Olga Mashilu's company. And it's a well-categorized business directory. There's Olga's number. Take a picture of this. And, she can help you to get your organization listed in this business directory. It's only 450 rands per annum, so it's not really money. But the feedback we're getting is very good. People are getting good exposure through this business directory. So there's the Transport Forum's website. Those of you who don't know it yet, transportseek.com. And you can use this website to access the business directory, obviously, and all the other features. Also download presentations. So the presentations you see here today will also be uploaded to the website so that you can download it all complimentary. Think about it, the Transport Forum is more than 16 years old. So all those presentations are on this website. You can download them complimentary. And there are more than 900 presentations. And this is a very powerful but simple little search engine you can use. So if you go to that website, transportseek.com, you will see to the left of your screen, there's a user menu. So you can log in username and password, or if you haven't got an account yet, you can, create your own complimentary account by clicking on sign up, and you can create your own username and password. So you need to be logged in before you can download. That's the way we actually build our database as well. So once you've logged in, you go to events, you select downloads, you get that search engine, and the search engine, you can either use the top field and type in a topic or a person's surname or whatever, and you search, and it'll bring up all the presentations according to your criteria. Or you can go to category and you select the day's date, and you'd search, and you can get all the presentations presented on that day being made available in the public domain. So great search engine, you're welcome to make use of that. So that brings us back to our program for today, the practical side of data, proudly hosted today by South African Association of Freight Forwarders, the Road Freight Association, and Ctrack, there's a new solution, Crystal. So our first presenter then for today will be Mr. Jace Lane, who's the Managing Director of Ctrack, and he will do an industry overview for us. Thank you very much, Jace.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the forum. It is a great privilege to be here today, and I'll be taking you through an industry overview as Harry has indicated to us. And I'm going to now just share my screen so that we can get straight into it. And Harry, I just want to confirm that you can see what I am seeing, which would be the start of the presentation.
Thank you, Jace.
Okay, excellent. So in terms of...
We can't see your presentation yet. You just need to share, please.
All right, we'll try that again. Let's just do that. Is it showing now, Harry?
Yes, good. You can continue. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So in terms of the presentation, looking at an industry overview and really speaking to the practical side of data, it was with quite interest that I chose this topic as the introduction, in that in God we trust, all others must bring data. And this presentation is really an epitome of that statement. When Dr. Juanita Marie informed us on Sunday she was sick, being a man of faith, I said, I've got this, I'm in it, and I'm going to do it. And then I reviewed the topic and realized there's a whole lot of data I need to get my hands on. And it was with this intent that bringing data together, I'm able to provide an industry overview and looking at the global dynamics, how we operate within a regional context, finding ourselves in a competitive space, touching base on what our reality is, and then some questions or some comments around moving forward. The presentation isn't initially structured exactly like that, but in various ways and forms we'll be touching and covering off on those various points. And as we go through this presentation, if you've got questions, put them into the chat box, and then we can cycle through those later on at the end of the presentation, as Harry spoke about. So I'll be presenting information compiled together with SAAFF and Ctrack, who I'm the Managing Director of. But let's get straight into the supply chain. So the supply chain, by virtue of the slide, shows that it is broken up into distinct layers. And these distinct layers start almost at the logistics layer at the very bottom, where we're talking about the active moving of the commodity. The moving of this commodity is supported by a transaction layer. And that is all your information around, like packing lists, air waybills, ocean waybills, supply invoices, manifests. And, that actually helps the movement, because this is really is around the procurement and the information flows which govern the logistics movement itself, which, as we've mentioned, is the physical transportation of the goods. But we have also various entities involved in this process, or actors, and they have different functions, that being from the consignor to the consignee, the freight forwarder or the agent in between, distribution warehouses. So there's a sea of players here who actually act out in the space below. But these people here, the entity system, the transaction-based system, as well as the logistics systems, all operate within a framework, a regulation layer, and that regulatory layer dictates the rules of the game. And that dictates the rules of the game, which influences the behavior of the supply chain by providing standards, legislation, and so forth to ensure that all of this operates in a fair and just manner. So this gives us a holistic view then of the supply chain, and what we can draw from this are really three important conclusions. One is that it's interdependent and highly so. We share infrastructure, particularly at this logistics layer right here at the bottom. But because it's shared, we all have a shared responsibility in the supply chain, from the regulatory level all the way down to the logistics level. And then that means that there's a shared responsibility to improve it to the benefit of SA Inc. And for those who are not familiar with what we mean by when we talk about SA Inc., we're talking about South Africa Incorporated. South Africa as a business, South Africa making a difference and impact in people's lives. So all of this, the supply chain overview, which is, as you can see, is complex, all operates not solely within a South African context, but in a global context. And this global context that we find ourselves in is expressed by these three graphs, and to give you a sense of it. So in terms of the world economy, which is $105 trillion worth in terms of GDP, South Africa is small. We're right down here at the bottom, just to the left, next to India. And so what this tells us is that we find ourselves influenced by large trading blocks. And these trading blocks are the USA or China, or actually trading countries, but they themselves organize themselves into trading blocks. And that's where you have the rise of BRICS and G7 nations and the fourth, and so forth. In terms of global trends, what we're seeing is this actually impacts how our local economy is impacted in the trade and logistics that we find, is that growth remains weak. If we're looking at quarter-on-quarter growth, we will find that it has been flat for the past period, with services showing better performance than goods. And when we're talking about goods here, we're talking about commodities, we're talking about manufactured items and services, would be your ICT kind of space. And we'll see that from a global context, African trade is showing a little bit more resilience than our developed countries or developed areas in the world, where our imports might have been down on the quarter by 3%, but exports been up by 1%. But year on year, it's looking better. And generally, the Southern Hemisphere, including probably Middle East, is looking better than most of the Northern Hemisphere. But even that said, 1 to 3% are not major growth rates. And all this information that I'm showing here has been obtained firstly from United Nations Division of International Trade and Commodities, and then the one visual on the left here is from the International Monetary Foundation. So that's the IMF information. So this is the global context in which we find ourselves in. If we have a look actually at if we bring it down to South Africa, and this is now just reflecting information slightly differently, up to 2021, our exports were to the value of $147 billion. And you can see that that is actually a fraction of the greater world's trade. But we do have some distinct places where we have a large portion of the market share, for example, 18% in platinum and about almost 10% in gold. But you can see we heavily, on our export side, heavily focused in terms of our minerals, our essential iron ores and so forth. And then citrus makes a big portion here, motor vehicles in the top right. And then we have associated industries with motor vehicles, and then it moves down to machinery, ICT, and even further. But these are our biggest trading partners from an exports perspective. This is just showing about 12 of the 202 countries that we export to, China being one of the largest, the EU being another big block, and then we obviously have the United States, and this is based off information up until 2020 from the Catlin House. But that's just looking at obviously the export side of things. But if we look at the import side, you'll see that here we're looking at about 30 inflows into South Africa. And what's interesting is that up until 2020, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria were our biggest imports, and that probably relates purely to petroleum oils and fuels from those spaces. Some componentry from United States and China almost at equal levels. And this gives us a sense of where all our imports are coming from. And this is where we will be, as in the supply chain, drawing commodities or items or goods from these areas. Once again, you can see where the concentration is in terms of imports, and it gives you a very good sense of where the focus is in terms of the industry. And a lot of our imports actually reside around here. If you look at that, almost 6.2% in ICT. And then obviously we've spoken already about oils and fuels. So there's a lot of information that's available out there. And what we'll now move on to next is just having a little bit of breakdown. Up until 2020, the top export destinations for South African goods was China, followed by the US, then India, Japan, and the UAE. But what was interesting, the fastest growing from 2015 to 2020 were these areas: Vietnam, Indonesia, Canada, Belgium over here. But the fastest declining, you could see it was a mixed bag, but interesting, China was one of them. It was one of the fastest declining, where it was one of our biggest trading partners. It's also one of the fastest declining at that point. In terms of import origins, we'll find that importing a lot more from Saudi Arabia and Nigeria and Zimbabwe, which is quite interesting there. That's $1.1 million worth of imports. And then if we look at the fastest growing, the top two here were Ghana and Poland, from who we're importing from. And the fastest declining, as you can see here, was Lebanon, Colombia, Tanzania, and Angola, and Singapore. And some of these drops are quite significant, but this is all the context that we find ourselves in. And why is that important? Is that it's to really tell us and communicate the following, that there are external factors that affect our supply chains. We have possible move to regionalization and globalization. That's driven by people looking to improve supply chain resilience after COVID-19. Many entities found themselves to be exposed where they'd offshored their manufacturing, and with the events of COVID and the Suez Canal blockage, there were major delays in these supply chains. We also have the formation of two distinct trading blocks, being the G7 versus BRICS, and that means that you could have a decoupling of trade routes based on West Africa starts leaning towards in terms of these various places. And then if the Afro-continental free trade area really starts taking root, we'll also see changes in that space. Some other things that could be impacting our supply chains in the near future is the green transition. Making sure that you have the right amount of green content could actually cause restrictions into where you can actually sell commodities to, especially into the developed countries of the world. We have geopolitical factors that are influencing us. We have fluctuating commodity prices. I think there was an article just probably in this week around Exxaro, who are saying that the coal prices dropped so much that it's no longer economically viable to export coal via road. So you have these interplays happening, and then we all know that when you're in a high interest rate environment, high inflation rate, it dampens local demand. And that local demand is for goods and services, and then that also then has a knock-on effect in terms of what is coming into the country. So if we now move just to a little bit closer, these are just some of the major trade corridors within the Southern African space. And you will see that what we've got here is that we have mapped from a logistics monitoring system perspective, which is a product of CRICMAS, the geopolitical events that have occurred over time. And you can see that what is clear from the data is that from 2000 to 2010 and 2023, that there is increased geopolitical risk within the Southern African region. Initially rose up in around the Angola and Zimbabwe area in 2000, 2010, mainly around about the Zimbabwe, with some starting to form in Gauteng. But if you look at 2023, most of the geopolitical risk is now sitting here in South Africa. And this impacts our transport corridors. It impacts decisions around, for example, if I happen to own a mine and I'm to get product out of Zambia from the copper belt, where do I go? Starts asking that question. Do I send my stuff to Beira, which is closer? Do I send my product through Mozambique, which is a bit further, or do I go through Durban? And if I'm looking at a risk perspective, which area would I start looking at, just purely from a risk perspective? So this is the kind of thing that starts impacting us. If we then move a bit closer, further again back to home, this is just our border crossings. This is our points where we interact with other countries around us, and often are barriers to trade. And you'll see that from a border crossing time, we're doing relatively well in terms of other countries relative to us. And if we just want to take a closer look at that, from a South African border crossing time at some of our key exit points or entry points to country. If we go to look at Mozambique, South Africa, that's Lubombo, Rocio Garcia border post, you'll see that it's been pretty flat from January, but recently it's been climbing. And here we're talking about a median time of about 10 hours to cross the border. Bite Bridge has actually been improving, and it's now down to around about 22 hours. And then you'll find that, for example, Swaziland through Oshoek and Namibia from the Western Cape side has been pretty flat at about 3 hours. And then Groblersdrift, Drift, Botswana, also improving slightly, but reasonably flat at about 20 hours, giving a sense to us of what's going on regionally. But border crossings or borders only form part of transport corridors, and here we're just having a look at corridors in South Africa on the road side of things, and the focus being road here. We can just have a look that over time, if we take Pretoria as a starting point to Maputo, that the time it takes to traverse that corridor has been getting longer and longer. And where we're sitting now is that this corridor is probably 20% slower than it used to be. The N3 has been pretty stable and flat. And just what these graphs indicate here is the average speed in specific zones. And the width here is where the volume really starts coming in onto these routes. So that is really our corridors. But just looking at the Mozambique RSA corridor, and there's a bit of a focus there at the moment. This is some recent work we've done. As you can see that corridor is slowing down. This is translating into significant queues. And this is just the average queue length per hour of the day, just from the 1st of August. And we are seeing that we are peaking here up until this was about the 7th or the 5th, between the 5th, I think this was around about 11 o'clock at night, that queue peaked to about 28 kilometers. Okay, so we are significant constraints potentially there, and it's a question of identifying what those constraints are. In terms of moving closer to the ports, and remember, I'm trying to give an overview here, so we're going to give you snapshots. In terms of global freight trade, coming into South Africa, we're not yet where we were in 2019, and this is metric tons from January to July as things stand. So we're not yet at pre-COVID levels. And if we want to look at how we're comparing relative to other ports in the region, we can see that Durban, Richards Bay are quite close on the heels of Maputo in terms of total time. And here we're talking days of vessels wait and are then serviced at the ports. But how does that actually translate? Is this good or is this bad? The question, the way to answer that is in terms of reviewing global port connectivity. And here we compare the top 10 ports, 100 being an index. So if you're doing better than the index and you had about 150, means you're highly connected as a port. Lots of liners are coming into you. Lots of large vessels are coming into you. These are all the metrics that are measured underneath this port connectivity. So if the best in class is 150, South Africa is around here at about 30. from a global connectivity perspective. So that means that if we are going to be used, we really need to be sharp in when we get used. And in terms of how sharp we are, I think that looking at the World Bank's product, the Container Port Performance Index of 2020, and we're just focusing containers, you'll see that Durban, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, and Guera have been ranked here. There's been slight changes and improvements, but I want to iterate this point here. This ranking is out of 348 ports in the world. So if we have a look at this here, unfortunately, we are at the bottom. And so when we have the opportunity to service, we're not actually servicing it well enough. Moving on to rail, we have quite an extensive rail network, and this is taken from the Transnet Freight Rail Report of 2022. We have a number of closed lines represented by the blue, but the main core lines are here in this green. But if there was ever a picture that painted 1,000 words, it'd be this next one. This is what's happened to the freight payload within the South African context. Rail has decreased from January 2019 to January 2023, and road has really picked up the slack. So rail has lost freight volumes to road, but that loss has been significant. We're talking about 36.6% has moved away from rail. It's, in short, it's in dire state. These are just some recent news articles speaking about cable theft, damage to infrastructure, the risk that it poses to industry, unresolved issues around locomotive shortages, and there's lots of collateral damage as a result of this. And that collateral damage is seen in truck queues at Richards Bay and Bombo, damage to road infrastructure, the consumption of road infrastructure faster than planned, as you have more vehicles, heavy vehicle meters transversing. And when the commodity cycle changes and prices drop, as Exara has already said, that it's no longer economical for road, there are going to be losses in the road sector in terms of businesses going out, because there's just not going to be the volume to sustain it. Moving on to air freight, the short message here of air freight is that whilst there was a pickup from 2021 to 2023, air freight levels are not yet at pre-COVID periods. And if you look at this graph here of international cargo moving in and out of Tambo, it's flat. It's staying where it is. There are some seasonal peaks around heading towards the Christmas and the busy period and post it, but it's pretty much flat. And as of August, the month-to-date volume that's been moved is about 707,000 kilograms, which puts us at that line to give you an indication of scale. So putting it all into one picture, our trade flow data is telling us this. This is how many heavy goods vehicles are moved on the various ports and the total TEUs from a container perspective, and then also how much is moved on specific lines from a rail perspective. So we do have quite a complex network, some key areas of strength and focus, and this gives you the sense of scale in terms of the various trade flows. We're almost towards the end of this presentation, bearing in mind that probably I'm overrunning a little bit already, but we've spoken about our regional, our local context, the global context, but we must also understand we operate within a regional context. And so what are other African countries doing? Because ultimately, as South Africa, we are competing with other countries. As of putting this presentation together yesterday, there was in the trade news that Harry spoke about an article where USA is looking to commit $200 million to improving the corridor from Angola to its port for the servicing of the moving of raw materials. That was in the press as of late yesterday afternoon. So we have competing nations. Ethiopia have opened up their logistics industry to direct foreign investment up to 49%. Focused on airports, railways, and roads. The Rwanda Revenue Service implemented systems to actually just really speed up inspections at border posts. The Kenya Ports Authority introduced an integrated security system to protect the infrastructure. The freight forwarders in Nigeria established a certification process to improve their logistics center. Every one of these countries are making concerted efforts to improve their environments. And then other countries are actually redirecting their trade to other ports. This was in the newspaper, I think a week ago, Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU-PF's recent comments around moving the movement of goods to through Mozambique rather than South Africa, because it's just cheaper. So that's where we find ourselves. So how do we respond as SA Inc.? What we've got here on the left is it's known as the Stacey matrix, and the Stacey matrix really talks about where we live in an environment with little agreement and lots of uncertainty. We live in a space of chaos. Now, our supply chains, our networks, our logistics can be found probably along a continuum here. But where you have chaos, you have anarchy, you have refusal to recognize problems. But when you're here, you want to focus on stability, and you need to push through to these areas of complexity where, depending on where you sit, it's going to be a question of trial and error, where the uncertainty, where you've got where your certainty is quite low, but you have high agreement. And this gives us an indication of where we want to get. We want to move things towards simple, but to move there, we need to look at emergent practice, innovation, have dialogue and debate, proceed through trial and error, and move to a more complicated scenario or less complex, being still complicated scenario where through judgment and policy decision making, you can almost get an expected outcome. So what are we as South Africa doing as we respond? As this gives us a very good sense of how to tackle our problems and what needs to be done, is that South Africa has responded with the National Logistics Crisis Committee. That's been born out of this chaos, I would say. And the interesting thing about this model is that highly adaptive systems, both man-made systems and natural systems, operate best here in this area of complexity near the edge of chaos. So if we want to become highly adaptable, this is the kind of space we want to play in. If we want to adapt to changing global trends, this is the space we need to play in. And once you become established, you can simplify it down. But how are we responding? We have partial privatization in the Durban ports. You have private sector participation on certain railway lines, or speak of that. And then, for example, you're also having, I know from a Cape Town port perspective, through the Western Cape government, the implementation of our logistics monitoring system with the sole purpose of improving logistics operations there through stakeholder engagement, supported by data, for the purpose of creating 20,000 jobs. So just to say that this, while it looks daunting, it is possible. And this is just an example from the sugar industry where we were involved for many years and still are, but we recognized we had a problem. This was overloading. Vehicles, 34% of vehicles coming into the industry overloaded. Recognized there's a problem, acknowledged there was a problem, met as stakeholders, realized that we were having a national impact in damaging the road infrastructure, and then made a consensus decision to address it, with realizing that we could improve payloads as an incentive. And just by having commitment, acknowledging the problem and actioning the data that we were getting, because remember, this is all about the practical side of data. I've presented lots of data, and it's our choice to respond. We were able to drive collectively down overloading to levels where it is now around 3%. So it's very possible, and I'm well over my time. Sorry, Harry. And I just want to finish off by saying thank you once again to everyone, and Viva South Africa Incorporated, because I think it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. What a great presentation, and a comprehensive supply chain overview. We really appreciate this, and obviously you've done lots of research. I think you've just done it. You know, size doesn't count anymore. It's now information and visibility. That's the one that's important now. And how we respond to this, Jay, thank you very much for that picture. I think that's so important to take note of that. It's quite concerning looking at the stats, you know, the ports and rail and so on. For what it's worth, you know, the Transport Forum next week, Wednesday, in Durban, we've got a live event in Durban, and it's a hybrid event, so it will also be streamed. We're going to talk about the efficiency of our ports, and it's been hosted by the Standard Bank and the Durban Chamber of Commerce, the Ports Forum. So yes, that's going to be very interesting. And then we haven't announced it yet. On the 14th of September, guys, you can take note. In other words, it's tomorrow, I think, in 3 weeks' time. 14th September, we're going to have a rail roundtable hosted by University of Johannesburg, also a live event, and even Transnet is going to partake in this roundtable. So make a note of that event. The Durban event, I think there's only about 20 seats left if you want to attend live there, so book quickly and you can attend that event. But Jace, thank you very much, and I'm quite sure people are looking forward to engage with you during the panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So, ladies and gents, that was a very great opening address of our event. Our next presenter then is Mr. Eugene van Niekerk. He's Executive Product Solutions at Ctrack SA. And Eugene is going to talk to us about the value of understanding data. Thank you, Eugene.
Good morning, Harry, and good morning, everybody that's attending. Harry, thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of the Transport Forum again today. And yeah, I'm going to congratulate Jace on the very interesting introduction to this session. It really is very informative. So let me just share my screen quickly. And Jace, I'll try and make up some time. Harry, please just confirm that you can see my screen.
Excellent. Thank you, Eugene. You can continue.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're talking about the value of understanding data. And I think I would like to start off with a slide that, you know, everybody recently is talking about data, but it's something that's been coming a very, very long time. And the very first evidence of people collecting and storing data was 19,000 years before Christ, through something they call the Ishango bone. And that's the first proof that people were actually writing stuff down for future reference. And as we see the timeline progressing, the concept of data analysis isn't new. It started in 1663 already, using technology, using equipment to be able to capture data and to be able to record data as far back as 1890, where a machine was built to actually help with the census in the US. In the 1900s, the magnetic tape was invented, where we were able to store more and more sets of data. And of course, in the modern era that we live in, the 1990s, the start of the World Wide Web, we just changed our world and our lives forever, and the impact thereof. And for many years, everybody said, you know, it was commonly known that if you didn't measure anything, you couldn't manage that information. And everybody said you need to record, you need to store, you need to have data. The reality for us as human beings, unfortunately, is that we do not have the capability of retaining information for long periods. And that's been proven, and there's a forgetting curve that you can look up that says once we get exposed to data, every day that passes, we lose half of the capability to retain that information. So unfortunately, with everything that's happening around us and with the amount of data that is available and that we see, the less time you spend with something, the quicker you actually forget about it. And I think there's a very famous saying from a gentleman called Albert Einstein that said, never memorize something that you can look up. I think that brings us to the place where there's so much data. It's difficult for us to actually try and find what we are looking for. The next slide is some time ago. This was actually a slide that was presented in 2020 about the amount of data that is currently being generated in the world, a day in data. And if we look at the statistics, and this is very much from social media, I think a lot of our companies, a lot of our industries make use of social media. But if you look at the volume of data that is being generated on a daily basis, 500 million Twitter tweets on a single day, 65 billion WhatsApp messages in a single day. The amount of data on platforms like Facebook, for instance, Meta, 350 million photos or 100 million hours of video. There's not a problem for generating data anymore. It happens every second of every day, and the difficulty today is to try and use that data and get real value from that. Another slide shows us, and this is 2023 information, that you can see the global data generated statistics. It is just increasing year on year on year. It's not going to get less. Unfortunately, the data that we have to consume, the data that we have to use to try and make sense of what's happening around us is just getting more and more. On the left-hand side, the type of media, email sent. Statistics says 231 million emails every minute. Or text messages, 16 million messages every minute. It is infinite, the amount of data that is being generated. And so I believe the challenge for most of us, independent of the industries that we work and operate within, the challenge we have to face is how do we use that data to actually get real value from it. And I'm going to talk to you about our experience from a technology perspective in the world where we use technology to record the movement of assets. Jace has been speaking in the introduction about all of the commodities that need to be moved via road or via rail. All the services that are being delivered to us every day, our parcels that we order online, the services that we ask for in terms of deliveries or repairs or whatever the case might be, in all of our industries, whether it's mining, whether it's logistics, whether it's freight, in the service environment, we use assets to either move commodities or to move cargo or to move people, to move services or to provide services. And Ctrack has been in that industry and in that game for over 38 years. That's what we do, is we use technology to generate data. And looking at it from that perspective, if we look at Ctrack and if we look at other companies in our industry, we are capable of recording tremendous amounts of data on a daily basis, on a weekly, on a monthly, on an annual basis. And we've managed the capability of providing that data visually in many forms. One of those forms is analytics, dashboards, to be able to roll up billions of records of data so that we can try and make sense of that information. And I think everywhere, in every industry, there's those dashboards. And I think, again, just referring back to Jace's presentation, a lot of information that we can visualize, different ways we can visualize the data. But ultimately, we need the capability to use that data to our benefit. And how do we start doing that? So I want to share a use case with you of one of the industries that we operate in. We operate in many different industries, but one of those industries is yellow equipment. And yellow equipment in the construction environment, in the mining environment, very, very expensive equipment to utilize, very specialized equipment to utilize. And for many companies, very critical to manage and understand exactly what is happening. The use case that I want to talk about is a use case where specialized yellow equipment is utilized in an environment. And for many years, we've been recording how that equipment is being utilized. But we've recently started to say, okay, we need to find real value out of this data. An example that you are seeing is what we call data patterns. And data patterns allow us through data algorithms to label data and make sense of that data in a better manner and to get real value from that data. So the sample that you are seeing, the blue dots represent a piece of equipment, yellow equipment, that is being operated, which moves between certain locations. The green dots represent the use of that equipment for the intended purpose. Let's call it the work side of things. That's when the vehicle is actually productive. And the yellow lines indicate when that equipment was either maintained, so it went to the workshop, or it was refueled, which of course is necessary. But to using data patterns and labeling the data, we are capable of now not just only saying that the equipment is switched on and it's active, and we measure the hours or the time that it is actually used, but we can now start redefining what is it actually used for. In this instance, we've broken down the data for the customer into 3 key areas, which is qualified as working, stationary, or driving. And as I mentioned, working means the equipment is actually productive and doing what it is supposed to be doing. Stationary means that the equipment it's active, it's switched on, but it's not doing anything. It's not working, but it's also not driving anywhere. And then, of course, the third one, the driving element, shows us that the equipment moved between working locations and other locations. And if we start analyzing the data and we see what is actually working or happening here, and we start to try quantify the impact of the use of that equipment, the easiest way to do that is to use fuel. Is one of the commodities that is a very, very big percentage of the operating cost of equipment, whether it is heavy commercial vehicles, whether it's yellow equipment. Fuel is a big cost to most companies. And unfortunately, the reality of our economy and the situation where we are currently is that we face another serious fuel increase. And that cost impact touches everybody in the supply chain in this environment. But if we look at the data that we've been able to extend or to take apart, and we look at the fuel impact, the cost of running the equipment, it becomes very evident that the type of equipment, the specialized equipment, and the work that needs to be done uses a lot of fuel, and the cost impact is significant. So if we look at everything in total, which most people do, it's very visible that the cost is significant. And that cost needs to be managed. And in many industries and with many businesses that we work with on a daily basis, people are very focused on preventing unnecessary costs, to cut down on those costs. And people look at the exceptions, the vehicles that might be idling too long, or the vehicles that might be driving too fast, because generally those actions incur more fuel consumption, impacts on the fuel usage, and of course the cost. So if you look at the overall picture, the fuel side of operating this equipment is significant. This is basically a month's worth of data. If we then take this data and we really focus on the individual elements, and we look at something where a lot of people focus, and that is the ability to reduce unnecessary idling of equipment or use of fuel, then the statistics suddenly become a little bit different in this particular use case. So in the graph at the bottom of the picture, we can clearly see the red blocks are what is called excessive idling. And excessive idling is defined as idling of equipment or assets longer than an accepted norm in the industry or in that operating environment. So that's the one focus, is the idling focus. And in this instance, we can clearly see that idling in this particular use case is fairly significant. And by using this data and by changing the behavior of the use of that asset or that equipment, we can reduce the idling time. And of course, that'll impact the use of fuel and the cost associated with operating that equipment. In this graph, it's also very visible that in this example, those assets are stationary, which means they are active, but they're not working. And they're also not moving beyond the parameter of what is considered excessive idling, or excessive being stationary. But that does have quite a significant impact in this instance. Now, if we look purely at the idling cost, we can see that in this example, idling for this particular operation has a fairly significant cost impact. And if we were able to use this information, as Jace also mentioned, and do something with it, address our operators, talk to our operations and say, we can see that idling is a bit of a challenge here. Let's reduce that. We can have very significant impact and very significant savings. So idling is one portion. Certain times of the year, especially the winter time that we've just come out of, certain industries find that idling specifically tends to be a little bit higher because drivers or operators of equipment, they tend to run engines a little bit longer to keep the heaters up, to make sure the cabins are heated. And that has a financial impact, not only the cost of the fuel, but in terms of maintenance, downtime in the longer term. But using the data, we can see where the problem areas are. In this particular instance, what was very significant is the impact of equipment that is stationary. And as I explained, stationary in this particular example, in this particular use case, it's an active piece of equipment that isn't working. It's not driving or moving anywhere, but it is just standing. It is just stationary. But in this instance, the engine of that piece of equipment is consuming fuel. And once we start looking at the data and we break it down and we know exactly what is happening, we can see that from a stationary perspective, there's an even more significant benefit that can be obtained if we reduce equipment that really just stands around and consumes fuel. And this is for short periods of time. So it allows us to look at our operations, look at our operators that operate our equipment, and by changing their behavior, we can have a very significant impact, in this instance, on the cost of the fuel that is consumed. So the challenge for most of us out there is to take all of this data that we are recording, literally minute by minute, second by second, and to be able to focus on what is really valuable and to get the actual data out there. We work with a lot of companies. We try and understand their pain points so that we can assist them to highlight and focus on these areas. But I think that is the benefit of really understanding the data that we have. So not only do we want to know that the equipment is active, but what are they actually doing? And if we can leverage the data that we get and use the data, I think that is the important thing. It's all good and well that we have it in a dashboard. If somebody doesn't do anything about it, it's not going to have an impact on the business. But I believe this is a use case that is relevant today for many companies, for many organizations, about using data and the value that the data can have for them. Harry, so yeah, thank you very much. I do hope that I've made up some time in terms of the program, but thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, our contact details is on the session. And please feel free to contact Ctrack if we can assist you in any way.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Yes, you have added lots of value to this session. And clearly, Crystal is a no-brainer. I think one is losing out if you haven't got Crystal, that's for sure. Very interesting history you've shown, and I'm glad in that equation you haven't brought in age, you know, especially. I think my friend Gavin Kelly afterwards, he might also remember the internet days when it was, you know, discovered. Yeah, so not to give away my age too much, but that was very interesting days. But yes, the data consumption is getting really, you know, complex. And I think if one can't analyze that, you've got a problem. And there's the tools are out there, Crystal. That's the solution, you know, to analyze the tools and to quantify the impact of your externalities to your organization. So, Eugene, thank you very much. I'm quite sure.
Thank you very much, Eddie.
Questions. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right, ladies and gents, let's have a look at our program again. So our next presenter then is Mr. Gavin Kelly. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Road Freight Association, and he's going to talk about using data to remain stable and relevant. Thank you very much, Gavin.
Good morning, everybody. I remember when modems were dial-ups. Walk and go make a cup of coffee. But Harry, I think the guys before us have said everything really. Gee, it's really a nice introduction to what I want to say. I've got 146 slides, guys, so maybe you want to go make yourself some coffee while I go. No, I'm only joking. Well, what do we want to talk about this morning? I think there have been two excellent presentations in terms of how one would use the data to remain relevant and stable. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And hopefully I'm not going to teach people to suck eggs in terms of this one. And now all of a sudden we have frozen. There we go. So I'm really going to run through very, very quickly who we are, what we are in terms of the introduction. I'm going to fly through that. Members, and then I'm going to get to the importance of the presentation, which is really about data driving decision making. And I think you've heard from the previous two presentations how important data is in terms of how you decide what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. And then I'm going to run through about 15 little strategies in terms of enhancing your data and how to use data. And then really a little bit of the science of data. That's a single slide, so don't worry, we're not going to have any sort of heavy discussions. So right, the RFA, it's the largest and most comprehensive national trade association for the trucking industry. We have various members, from transporters who move the stuff to associates and affiliates, people who help those transporters in terms of either supplying goods or doing research or consulting or broking or training. We have students and emerging logistic companies. So we have members who don't even have a single truck, but we help them, we grow them, we develop them. We have government departments and authorities. And interestingly enough, 88% of our members, of that total membership, falls into the SMME category. We've been around since 1975. So we've been around the block a couple of times. What are we? Non-profit. So we, just like all other associations, use whatever funds we generate to push back into programs. We're not an SOE. I know we have an acronym that sounds like the RAF and the FRA and the ARF, but the RFA is a private entity totally. We're compliant. We are involved with the Department of Employment and Labor. We are the largest employee representative at council. And most importantly, it's a voluntary membership basis. Around the world, organizations like us are compulsory. In South Africa, we haven't taken that step yet. The Department of Transport has still left membership of such associations as the RFA as being voluntary. And then all of our individuals who staff us are skilled, and none of them have a transport company. So we are totally independent. The role of the members, we're really here to look after members' needs, and it's the members that drive how the association interacts, what lobbying it does, what projects we do, and how we keep ensuring that the industry itself meets the challenges, issues, and concerns that are part of our everyday members' lives. So that's really just the background. Right, let's take a look at why data is important. Well, very, very simply, ladies and gents, data ensures that there's continual business growth. And I think you've seen from the two previous presentations how getting data in shows you where not only is your business going, but where the sector is going and where you are in terms of that sector or that commodity or that style of transport. So the first thing that it does is that it will ensure that your business keeps growing. If you don't know what the businesses around you and what others are doing, without seeing their secrets, of course, but you're getting the ideas of what's happening, your business can't grow, can't remain sustainable. Then obviously there's knowledge and innovation. We heard a lot of what one of those tracking companies do. You can imagine the types of innovation that are out there and some of the solutions that you might be sitting up late at night at trying to resolve. Actually, data can help you with that. So there's the knowledge that you can bring in from the data sets, the information that you get. And then, of course, that'll help you to innovate, because every one of us, whether you're a private business or you're an association like the RFA, or you're a broader association, wants to innovate to ensure that you're always at the cutting edge. Then communication is very, very important. You get data in, you need to be able to get the salient points of that data, of what you've heard, what you've read, what you've seen, what you've learned, to be able to communicate that out to those who need it and to those who don't understand what it is that you do and why you do what you do and why you may be the better choice. Adaptability. I don't know how many of you remember, I think it also goes back to the old style of internet, Harry. There was a comedian in South Africa called Peter Dirk Ace many years ago, and he had a show called Adapt or Die. And that's probably one of the most important phrases that anybody should always keep constantly in the foremost of their decision making. You must be able to adapt, and the data gives you that information, which tells you where and when you need to adapt, and in some cases, how the adaptation should take place. But if you're using this data, you will then remain at an unrivaled level of being able to adapt. And then finally, it brings out new business opportunities. How many times have you heard somebody saying, well, you know, I went and I studied teaching, or I studied BA Arts, or I studied BCom, or I studied BSc, but today I'm doing something totally different. And that's what it's all about, is getting information, understanding where you fit into that picture, and changing your business. So business opportunities come at you while you are busy collating data, while you're sifting through data, while you are making sense of the amount of data or the types of data coming at you. Right, let's look at some enhanced data-driven strategies. And really, as I said earlier on, hopefully I'm not teaching anyone to suck eggs. I listened to those first two presentations, and I think this is going to help those who might be somewhat flustered or somewhat frightened by data. And you've seen the amount of data that is coming in at you on a daily basis. Some of us are on our phones 28/7, I think is no longer 24/7, and then some of us aren't. So the first thing you need to do in terms of data is to define exactly what it is you want to do. That's the most important thing, irrespective of what you do in life. So you need to define those objectives, the data that you are going to collect. What is it that you're trying to do? Secondly, try and guard against bias. And you know, all of us have this bias. So I'll give an example here. There's this bias against rail from many road operators. And why is that bias there? Well, it's underpinned by probably two realities or simple truths. Unreliability is the one. And the second one, I suppose, is around the amount that you can place on a truck vis-a-vis a train. You're going to have far more tonnage to put on a train than you would on a truck. So when I say there's some bias, it's probably more the customer than the road freight industry itself. So you need to understand that you will have some biases when you look at data. You need to put them to the one side and understand that the data is giving you objective facts, so take the bias out of it. And if there are some ideas that you have, does the data then confirm your beliefs or actually show it something different? And then understand exactly what it is that you need to see. A very, very important part is ensuring data literacy. Quite often within our organizations, we dump a huge amount of data on unsuspecting employees, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to sift through it. They actually don't know while it's all coming at them. And those of them who've got faster fingers than that who is sending it to them, pass it on to someone else. So you need to make sure that the objectives are correct, those right KPIs, that everybody who gets data understands their role in that and what they need to do with that data, so they don't just have these mountains of data coming at them every day. That if there's any sort of reporting or data mining, you might want to call it, the salient facts that you want to get out of that data, that those reports are made and that they are quite succinct, they're quite focused. Then if you're going to start having huge amounts of data coming at your business, and you find that somebody like me, born before computers, doesn't know how to deal with this, that you develop skills, you develop individuals that can actually use that data, understand the data, interpret the data. Then the type of language that you use, and we find this happening often, is that a fair amount of data is thrown out there, but there isn't really the right wording to go with. This is how the data is going to assist you in that department, or this is what we're looking at, see if you can find trends. And then finally, you need to recognize those who use the data and how that data rewards the business itself, so that focus can be put on that data and on the mining of that data. When should you start gathering data? Should you wait for next year? Should you wait until AI comes around? You've got to start doing that right now, because that's the sort of ecosystem that you're working in terms of partnerships, and you're getting data every day. And those are the relationships you're getting data from. And you've got to decide as a business, which are the important bits that you need to mine, which are the ones that are going to influence how your customers see you, because that's important. It isn't only how you see yourself. And a lot of influence these days sits on a thing called, right at the bottom, there's social media, likes, dislikes, how reporting is done. There is so much real and false media out there, using of mobile apps and multimedia. So you've actually got to start gathering data now, relevant data, and using it as is deemed fit in your business. This is really where the difficulty lies for many businesses. This tsunami of data that comes at a business, because I can tell you, once you start setting up gathering points, data will come at you at an incredible rate, as we've seen earlier on from the Ctrack presentation. So now you need to be able to organize that data, clean it up in terms of what you are looking for, what you need, defining or up-to-date data, and defining the types of outputs you want from that data. So that's an important part. You need to work with the data and organize the data that you need. You mustn't try and eat the whole elephant at one go. Only the data that is critically specific to those objectives, those outcomes that you had at the very beginning set. Then you may have questions in terms of your business, in terms of what you're doing, and you can't find solutions. So the right thing to do is to identify those unresolved questions and then focus on them, finding out whether you're asking the right questions, finding out whether you actually understand what those questions would lead to or where they lie, and then looking at the various options, the scenarios that might come out of the answers to those questions or to where the questions lead you. And that's when you go looking for the data to answer those questions. So now you know what it is you need to focus on, and you can use data to answer some of those questions. And generally, the good old Irish fellow called Murphy will join you, and you will find that suddenly you've got new questions or you've got new answers to new questions if you're lucky. But you might suddenly find there are new questions, or you might hopefully get new answers to those old questions that have been really, really haunting you. There will be quite a lot of old answers to old questions, but that just validates that you've been on the right path from the get-go. Another important, very important step in using data is analyzing and interpreting that data, understanding what it is that you've got and how it's going to help you. Because quite often we get swamped in a whole lot of data that really has no real impact. Looks good, it crunches numbers for us, and it looks like we know what we're doing, but is it really the data that you need? And when you interpret it, is it bringing you to where you need to be to understand the specific issue that you're dealing with, or the growth trends that you want to follow? That brings us to trends and patterns. Data really helps you in terms of that. Where are you compared to competitors? Where are you in the sector? Are you at the moment in an upward swing, or is it really downwards? And we've heard a lot of talk on various platforms over the last week about the commodity cycle, that the commodity cycle is beginning to go down, that it's now becoming, definitely in terms of road freight, no longer as profitable, as feasible, as sustainable as it was a couple of months or a couple of years ago. So data will help you understand the trends and the patterns, which will then guide you in terms of the types of investments you may or may not make, the expansions, whether you should expand into something else, and whether you actually are where the rest of the businesses, or hopefully ahead of the curve. Something that frightens a lot of people is actually being able to read the data. So who are your clients, your customers? Who are the people in your business that need to see the data and understand it very quickly? So you need to be able to present the data in a digestible way. And this is just an example of, if you are focusing on when incidents occur, then you need to have something as simple as this, because from a quick look, perhaps your schedulers will see, okay, 44%, and this is an example, 44% of our incidents happen in the afternoon. So we need to look at what's happening in the afternoon, or reschedule, or change our operations, or whatever the case may be. So you've got to make sure that the way in which you collate and then present the data is in a way that those whom you're aiming the data at can actually easily understand. AI, and I'm not sure whether that should really read AI technologies, and these are at the forefront of many, many things. The top 10 hot technologies that are running around right now. How are you using them? Do you use them? Why would you use them? More importantly, how do they make you more efficient, more sustainable, and ahead of that curve? So there are some interesting processes there, and you will see a lot of this in the OEMs in terms of truck tractors or trucks. You'll see it in loading equipment. You'll see it in forwarding. You'll see it in proof of deliveries. You'll see it in stock management. You'll see it in terms of order to sales, order to stock. You'll see it in terms of many, many, many things. So that's an important thing to remember when looking at new data and how data will support you. Setting your goals, I'm sure everyone is very, very aware of that. And the most important one is that M, always has been. It's no good having goals or objectives if you can't measure them, if you don't know where you are in terms of what you want to achieve. And the other parts obviously come into that, but being able to measure, and data helps you with that. It helps you to see where you were, helps you to see where you're going, and it helps you to decide where you should be and whether this is the right goal or not. tools, data relies on tools, and data supports a number of tools. And as I said earlier on, social media is a huge player in any sort of market, definitely in our market, in freight. So tool number 10, good PR is a huge, huge, huge important tool that you need to use in terms of selling your business and growing your business. But your data can help you in terms of all of those things and is part of the information you place into those various tools. Do not be scared to reevaluate, to revisit, to go back and look at what your objectives were, to go back and look at what your progress is and your successes are, where the challenges are. That's the best thing about data, is it keeps telling you where you are in terms of the cycle. It shows you where you could change, what perhaps you should change, and where those various challenges lie. Don't be afraid of reevaluating, revisiting. It doesn't mean you change, you throw everything out and restart. It helps you to tweak, because perhaps it shows you are on the right line, but in terms of the data you're getting, you can see where these tweaks are that you need to make. And then continue evolving. Data allows you to evolve. I'm sure you've seen in those previous two presentations, the very first one, I'm sure has shown many people things they didn't even know were out there in terms of data and in terms of what's happening. And if you've got your finger on the pulse of the data streams that are important to you, you can continue to evolve, continue to operate better, more efficiently, and obviously more sustainable. So that's it really in terms of what I've just spoken about. It's a quick snapshot of those 15 slides. I said I'd speak about the science of data. For those of you who need to go study for tomorrow's test, here's the science of data. It's really all around the little bits and pieces of data that help you in terms of understanding where data feeds come from, real world applications. So case studies, things that are happening are very, very important, looking at what's happening around you. But of course, those other little fans in terms of that diagram, very, very important. And of course, that will then help you on the path to using data. That's it from me, Harry, from the RFA. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gavin. This is a great presentation. I've been writing here. I don't know, you say you speak a hind leg of a donkey. I wonder if you write a lot, can you write a hind leg of a donkey as well? That's what I've been doing. Gavin, yeah, the data-driven strategies are very important, and I think definitely should one not have visibility, you're blind in business, and the business definitely won't be able to grow. So data-driven decision-making and adapt or die, yeah, definitely very valid comments, and thank you very much for a great presentation. I'm quite sure they will lead you a lot of questions in the panel discussion. Thank you very much, Gavin. I really appreciate it. Okay, ladies and gents, so what we're going to do now, let's take a short break, 15 minutes break. So go and get that cup of coffee. And then after the break, we will then, as we said, we're going to swap the two presentations around. So after the break, we will have Lisa and Jacob presenting visibility in the logistics network. And thereafter, then Kelly Lane, a case study on stack data. So let's take a break. I'll put up a timer for us. See you in about 15 minutes time. Thank you very much.
What does it take to compete on the world stage? To go head-to-head with What does it take to compete on the world stage? To go head-to-head with the best of the best? Excellence, agility, resilience, the willingness to keep on evolving. It takes courageous leadership to be bold and chart the course, to connect the dots, bringing stakeholders together, to overcome the hurdles we all face, and to deliver best practice. It's about business at the click of a button, delivering at the speed of the internet, connecting people, products, and places, strengthening our supply chains, faster and more cost-effective than ever. Since 1921, we've given voice and vision to the freight forwarding industry, navigating the tides of international trade, evolving ever more sophisticated supply chains, bridging local and global markets to move our economy forward. Welcome to our world. The South African Association of Freight Forwarders, architects of transport for over a century.
Great video by South African Association of Freight Forwarders, one of our hosts of this session today. Ladies and gents, you're welcome back. We're still looking at the practical side of data, and we're going to have our next two presenters, Lisa Boshoff, she's a business and supply chain analyst, and Jacob van Rensburg, who's the head of research and development with the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. And they're going to talk to us about visibility in the logistics network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harry. I will start off. Let me just quickly share my screen and you will let me know if it doesn't come through.
Telling us it is coming through, but it's not there yet.
Let's just give it a second. I've got a frozen screen here on my side.
If need be, I can flight it on your behalf. Right.
How's that, Harry?
Perfect, perfect. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, good morning, colleagues, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name, as Harry introduced me, is Jacob van Rensburg, and I am the head of research and development here at SAAFF, and I will provide a brief academic overview of the use of data towards improved visibility in the logistics network. So kind of a space where the academic literature and data analytics intersects with logistics. So in conjunction with my colleague, Lisa Boshoff, who will provide a more practical approach. And it will undoubtedly build on the presentations already given by Jace, by Eugene, and also by Gavin. And many of the colleagues will also know us through our work with the weekly BUSA cargo movement report, the daily SAAFF CRICMA supply chain report and the related work with the CRICMA LMS team. So for the colleagues who are interested in that, please do get in touch with us. So on this first slide, I want to show the relationship between economic growth and development, trade, supply chains, and logistics specifically. So let me quickly just get a laser pointer there. So here on the left-hand side, we have a funnel that shows socioeconomic growth and development top down and logistics bottom up, and the unique relationship that they have with each other. And as is widely accepted, efficient logistics is a critical factor in socioeconomic growth and development. And as such, socioeconomic growth and development is highly dependent on economic growth, which something is quite lacking in South Africa, unfortunately, of late. And moreover, international trade is a significant driver of economic growth and development. Indeed, some 60% of global GDP is in trade. And this is the case also for South Africa, as Jace alluded to earlier in his presentation. And now for trade to flow smoothly, it requires the effective functioning of global value chains and the participation in these value chains and supply chains. And this is true for most countries as it is for South Africa. And improved logistics performance, the vehicle of trade, so to speak, increases the efficiency in trading by reducing the time and cost to trade, which could then result in an increase in the volume of trade and ultimately spill over into economic growth and development. And now this relationship between efficient logistics, bottom up, and socioeconomic development top down is widely accepted by national policy makers to multilateral agencies, economic actors, and various logistics service providers and actors in the extended logistics and supply chain, the colleagues online really here today also. And now this direct positive circular relationship between there is really a direct positive circular relationship between these concepts. So that's why it's very important, that the flow, improving logistics in turn improves socioeconomic growth and development. And on the other side, the circular flow, as we see economic growth and development, this will also improve the efficiency in terms of trading goods across international borders. Now, logistics specifically here on the right-hand side, we can say that logistics systems, they operate at different intersecting and or aggregate organizational and geographic levels, encompassing critical actors in this system. And at the most basic, a logistics system is as simple as an individual consumer ordering a good online source locally. And think about your activities with things such as Checkers 6060 app, or Take-A-Lot orders, or Pick and Pay orders, and the like, Uber Eats, for example, at the most basic level. Then at the most complex level, a logistics system encompasses all actors at all geographical levels. And it's important to take cognizant of the fact that firms represent the dominant actor in the logistics system as consumers of logistics. And indeed, at this juncture, we should distinguish between users of logistics and providers of logistics. And in most cases, users include all the role players, both public and private, which will relate to shippers, carriers, freight forwarders, clearing agents, terminal operators, and transporters, and the like. Then on the other hand, providers of logistics include national infrastructure such as roads, ports, airports, and other related spatial connectivity. And now these considerations are key, as national logistics systems are the providers of infrastructure and spatial connectivity, whereas business logistics systems are the users. So logistics, as I've shown in the previous slide, is super important for economic growth and development. But how do we use data to measure logistics performance and increase the flow of goods and services in the international supply chain. So following from the first slide, the next slide shows how these various levels in which these concepts of global value chains at the aggregate level to supply chains and logistics operate. And now each of these concepts operate within a smaller spatial environment, all down to individual logistics processes. And the colleagues online can think of any examples within their own business. And according to the systems thinking approach, to improve the performance or the efficiency, so to speak, of the system as a whole, one needs to look at the performance of each individual activity and the linkage between these activities. And now ultimately, logistics performance, process performance refers to the measurement and evaluation of the efficiency, effectiveness, and overall success of various activities involved in managing and moving goods, information, and resources within a supply chain. And this assessment aims to gauge how well the logistics process functions and contributes to achieving goals. And now typically, as the colleagues will know online, we measure the success in terms of the time it takes to move goods, the cost related to moving goods, the service reliability of the system, and the risk associated with moving goods. And now obviously the success of the logistics performance speaks to reducing the cost, reducing the time it takes, improving the service reliability, and de-risking in terms of various aspects of the end-to-end logistics and supply chain. Now, this following slide shows the various steps in the logistics process and indeed the accompanying complexity of the logistics system. And I think Jace alluded to it earlier in terms of the various levels in which a logistics system operates, and the many role players involved. And even with the most basic logistics process, that could involve 10 to as many as 40 role players in any one shipment. And there are levels of activity relating to the regulatory levels, the rules of the game, so to speak, the various entity level, the entities and role players involved, the transactions underlined by the commercial documents involved in logistics processes, and then ultimately the physical movement of goods, the actual logistics. So in this little schematic, we have the various stages also, starting from the purchase order management here in yellow, all the way to the international shipping events in red, and then the destination events or inbound, so to speak. And now the thing with logistics, and I think this was also alluded to earlier with the speakers, there are very many data generators in the extended logistics and supply chain environment, but unfortunately, as of yet, not a high level of technological uptake and integration between the various systems, peoples, and the like. Because quite simply put, the underlying aspect and the underlying business of logistics remains quite simple, and that is moving goods from one place to another. Now, the success in integrating all of these activities and factors revolves around the people, the processes, the platforms where the information is kept, in terms of the quantitative and qualitative metrics in these platforms. Now, Gavin had many Venn diagrams and points where things intersect, and this little slide just shows the focus on people, really, the data scientist Venn diagram, and the various implementers of using data, which is, basically shows what a good data scientist would look like. And so I like this quote that I found, which says, data without action is like a recipe without a kitchen. It might look good on paper, but it won't satisfy your hunger for results. So indeed, to make sense of all the noise and the concepts in terms of data analytics, machine learning, deep learning, AI, and all the like, it's it's an intersection of many different things, including communication, statistics, programming, and business. And that's why I like this illustration from Stephen Colassa very much, which describes the perfect data scientist in a Venn diagram. And the space where data analytics and logistics performance converge in the global academic literature is on these concepts on the right-hand side, expertly showed in a study by Kinra et al. Entitled An Unstructured Big Data Approach for Country Logistics Performance Assessment in Global Supply Chain. So this also expertly differentiates from the providers of logistics or national infrastructure and spatial connectivity on the top here, where the focus in the literature is on providers of infrastructure, waterways, intermodal structure, railways, airways, and the like. And then the other, the logistics users, so to speak, where the focus on the literature is on the ports, the land borders, road and rail, and the like here at the bottom. The next slide, and this adds to the steps presented by Gavin also, I believe. And I want to end with this slide. This is my last slide, which shows the data investigation process framework with example practices. So this could really be used and be useful in all logistics and supply chain endeavors using data analytics. And now the illustration shows a process that involves 6 key steps. Now, although this process may be somewhat linear and cyclical, the fact is, as we do know, the complexity of logistics results in the fact that often logistics is quite non-linear and dynamic in nature. Many processes happening concurrently and goods moving whilst certain prerequisites need to be resolved before the movement can go on to the next step. But just a quick summary of this process. The 6 steps are as follows. First, one needs to frame the problem, such as, and this can relate to anything in your business, such as why is my container taking 3 days and not 2 days from the depot? Why is the container terminal congested, or anything the like? And then secondly, consider and gather data, as Gavin also alluded to. The time is now to gather data. And one can ask the questions: what is currently available? Where is it stored? Where can I find it? What is lacking? How can I add to that? Then thirdly, one needs to process the data, organize, structure, clean, and the like, explore and visualize data. And I believe the next 2 presenters, Lisa and also Kelly, will show various graphs and visualizations of how to capture the data. Fifthly, consider different models and their respective fits to the problem. And then lastly, communicate and propose action to tackle these problems, and conveying the insights and the results and the findings of the data. So this little process, whatever the problem in whichever space of logistics, be it multimodal or road or rail or anything really, can be used and can be useful in terms of tackling logistics problems with data. So I want to end here and just mention a quick quote. Logistics is basically the lifeblood of economic growth and development, seamlessly connecting supply chain with demand and supply, and propelling nations forward on the path of progress. Thank you for your attention to this presentation. I'll stop here and hand over to my colleague, Lisa. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies. I'm Lisa Boshoff, as Jakob alluded to, and I will be taking over the second part of the presentation. I'll just quickly bring up my slides if someone can just confirm that they are visible.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you so much, Harry. So I'm just going to shift a few things here. There we go. So I work with the South African Association of Freight Forwarders as a supply chain analyst and a business analyst. And my presentation today will take a bit more of a practical twist to the conversations that have been had. I won't necessarily talk about one specific project, but the idea is really to get you thinking, the listeners online, in how you can incorporate this from a different perspective. So my presentation will be on bringing data into practice in the logistics network. As an association, we are concerned with the entire supply chain, and data might look a little different to us as we don't have warehouses to manage. We don't have fuel consumption issues. Our focus is much more holistic, looking at the supply chain and its different challenges from a very different perspective. With that, I'd like to start by saying there are a lot of different ways to map out the process, and this is just the process that we use internally, so not necessarily academic approach, but this is the one that works for us. So the 4 phases that we really use on a frequent basis is collecting the raw data from a variety of sources. I won't dwell too much on that as it has been touched quite a bit, but I do want to highlight that it is always important to remember that there is a lot of data available on public platforms as well that can be layered onto internal data for a new perspective. And that's something that we've really been working with the GroupMate team to explore. How do we use data in the public platforms, link it with private data to create something completely new? And I think that's really what Kelly Lane's presentation will touch on in the next session. Then we create visibility in data through dashboards, analyze the data through specific questions or real-time issues being experienced, and then finally implement new processes or decisions. Then it becomes necessary to track the impact thereof and return to phase 3 if necessary. I'll clarify that statement at the end of my presentation. I do have a very specific case study that will be very interesting, I believe, for the listeners. So firstly, using data to create an overview through dashboards. So we're using the LMS as an example. GroupMate, in collaboration with SAAFF, developed the LMS, which consists of a number of dashboards and reports that provide insight into port operations at the Durban port, the Cape Town port, and then also I will highlight some corridor work that we've been working on. These reports cover the marine side, the water side, and then also the land side. So you get a very holistic view of all the operations using vessel data, using public data, and then also using GPS data. As I said, layering all of this data on top of each other to create a very unique perspective. And then we also have, from this relationship was born the corridor comparison report. It looks at the 3 of our main trade flow corridors. So the N4 corridor into Mozambique, the N3 corridor servicing Durban, and then also the Walvis Bay corridor. And this will be distributed on a weekly basis to our members, bringing in vessel turnaround time in conjunction with border crossing times and travel time across the actual corridor to get an idea of what the congestion, the bottlenecks, and the pressure points will be on the different corridors. This will especially be very useful in business decisions, picking a port, picking a route, choosing new suppliers, and so forth. Then we'll come to using data to tell a story through the analysis process, and we'll be using the port comparison report as an example. So something that has been quite a big question of late for a lot of our members and a lot of people in the supply chain is, which port in South Africa do I use? Which is the most efficient? Which has the most challenges? What can I anticipate? And this is a first attempt at answering that question. So once you have your data in a palatable format, you can use it to make informed decisions. One of our current projects referred to comparing the Cape ports to identify which would be the best for a specific client's certain needs for their specific supply chain. And here we get an idea of general vessel turnaround times of each of the 3 ports in the Cape compared by the different ports in and around Southern Africa. So here you can get an idea of what Walvis Bay's turnaround looks like, Maputo and Beira as well, just for comparison's sake. And then also if you use the Port of Durban frequently, it will put it into perspective a little bit for you. So you can get an idea by filtering the different date ranges. So here we have full year average, getting an idea of what the turnaround times look like. Then we look at August to December 2022. This is very specifically selected to get an idea of the strike impact that we had in October, to get an idea of how quickly the port recovered, and then also just looking over the past 8 months, or I'd rather say 7.5 months, what the vessel turnaround time looks like for the current moment without any significant issues, just to get an idea of what the challenges look like, the vessel turnaround time, and so forth. And then this will allow you to make on-the-ground decisions. As I said, it's very useful, it's very simple. It's something that you might be able to get from external data sources, not necessarily internal, but it is just a different perspective. Then I also want to layer this, or not layer, but add this to the previous slide and say, this is the volumes of cargo handled through these different ports. So if you have a look at the previous slide and you consider the vessel turnaround time perhaps being a little bit longer in the Port of Cape Town, then noticing the higher volumes, you can get an idea of perhaps the higher turnaround time is due to larger vessels handling more cargo. There's a lot of interpretations on that. But what I do want to highlight is that if you use this in conjunction with the vessel turnaround time, it paints a picture of port efficiencies or inefficiencies in some cases. But just to give you an idea of what happens, you can get, for example, looking at, if you have historical data, you can start looking at old data, comparing, say, every December for the past 5 years to get an idea of what you could expect for this December. So that's just something from a planning perspective that might be useful to consider. We have seen that a lot of the trends in the vessel side and in the ports is very cyclical. It's very seasonal. So you can see it's affected by public holidays. It's affected by festive seasons. It's affected by weather conditions. So you can sort of plan ahead and plan around that if you have the data to do so. Then we're looking at using data to drive change and track through implementation project. So we'll be using a case study that we did with the Port of Durban as an example. So just some background on the project. In the early 2020s, stakeholders in the logistic network raised a lot of issues regarding the night shift and the weekend shifts operations at the Port of Durban being considerably slower than other operations. In August 2022, SAAFF, in collaboration with CRICMA, did a data analysis with the Port of Durban TPT and shared the results. We made some changes, we made some recommendations, and we tracked the progress for a few months. And now I would say it's almost exactly 1 year later that we're looking at the project again to get an idea of what the impact of these changes were, and then the hard truth about data analysis that I do want to conclude with. So this is a lot of information, and in the interest of time, I won't go into too much detail with it as I'm nearing the end of my time. But what I do want to just mention is we had a lot of data. The yellow bar indicates the date of analysis. The green bar indicates the end of the process. So you can see here, this is from the time that we implemented or suggested the changes and Transnet implemented to the last time we checked the data. And then here we have today. So I won't go into too much detail, but we can see that this is, I'll just explain. So this is the morning shift, afternoon shift, and evening shift. So we can see the truckers complaining about slow operations in the evening shift aren't necessarily lying. So that's just something very interesting. Our boss Jonita always likes to say that there's only one truth, and that comes through data. So I believe that this is a very valuable truth for us. But nevertheless, we can see the significant improvement over the 5 months that the improvements were implemented, or the changes were implemented. And then we see over the past 8 months for 2023, a very different trend. And I won't say too much on that. I believe everyone can, after all the presentations we've had, I do believe we can all deduce what this means. So I'll just carry on and just skip through a few of these. I'll just highlight, I won't go into too much detail, but the crux of the matter is that we compared the volumes with the turnaround time. And basically what we found is just that higher volumes means that the port was operating a bit quicker, lower volumes mean that there were slower turnaround times. And we have seen that there was quite a significant volume of people working over weekends from the private industry side, which we were very happy about. But we do see that it wasn't necessarily met by the same performance from other stakeholders. but nevertheless, that is still a conversation happening. But what I do want to conclude with is the big truth about data analysis that we've experienced. Data can only get you so far. I know it seems like a low point to end the presentation on. However, I chose this specific case study for a reason, and it's really to drive home this point. We have seen it time and time again with the key of improving the supply chain and operations is to use data, absolutely, but use it to drive behavioral change in humans. The big truth about data analysis is data can only get you so far. Without implementation, tracking, monitoring, and benchmarking, data is just a bunch of numbers. The key is to use it to drive sustainable change in human behavior. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you so much, Elisa and Jacob, for this excellent presentations. Clearly, your data is telling a beautiful story, and clearly you guys are driving change. That's definitely so. Interesting, Jacob, also the data versus logistics performance and success versus integration. I enjoyed a lot listening to what you've been telling us. And then the comparison reports and you're using data to tell a story, Lisa, that it's that with a tacky, it's a talk, vessel turnaround time and using data to drive that change. So thank you very much. And I think that people will have some questions for you during the panel discussion. Thank you so much for these great presentations. Ladies and gents, then last but not least, our next presenter then is Mr. Kelly Lane. He's the Operations Director at Ctrack. He's going to give us a case study on stacked data. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Great, thanks very much, Harry, for the introduction there. Let me just share my screen. Harry, if you can just confirm that's coming through for everyone.
Perfect, you can continue, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just move this off here to the side. Okay, great. Firstly, as Harry alluded to, my name's Kelly Lane. I work with Ctrack. I'm kind of in charge of all things operational. And looking at the topic today and looking at a specific case study, we thought that this current journey that we are on in terms of predicting stack dates would be a great example on how data and analysis come together essentially. So this presentation is going to be looking at how do we leverage data and various statistical modeling and in terms of the end goal, in terms of how do we predict vessels and how do we firm up on stack dates. So just touching on some points that have already been covered by some other presenters, and I think the fact that they've come up numerous times highlights to the importance of them. But essentially, why is data important? And what it does, it enables us to get valuable insights and informs decision making. If we wanted to look at driving efficiency, improving productivity, or driving innovation, data really forms the cornerstone of those decision-making processes. And without data, how does one adapt? How do we improve? And how do we remain competitive in this environment? So when we're trying to look at the practical side of data, we need to be able to move from a theory to the implementation. And value is often only realized from data when we start solving real challenges. And that these data-driven solutions really do need to be able to lead to tangible benefits for users, for companies, and ultimately save you rands and cents. So, when we're looking at some of the key aspects within the data and transportation, really, it's critical that we integrate to the various systems to get a comprehensive overview. The transport industry is complex, there's multiple role players, and to be able to get a really good view, we need to be able to collect data from various sources and we need to integrate to them. The challenge with integrating to numerous data sources is how is the data of good quality? How accurate is it? So whenever we're looking at how to interpret this and how we apply it, we really need to use good data validation techniques to really ensure that it's accurate and reliable. And then essentially, that's something that was highlighted in many other slides, is how do we turn this data into through analytics into valuable insights. So just looking at how some practical examples of how data has been utilized in various spaces around the world, And if we're looking specifically around operational efficiency, in UPS's example, they were able to optimize route delivery and essentially save on an annual basis, they reduced 100 million miles and reduced the fuel usage by 10 million gallons. So, I mean, that in itself is significant, and we can all see the benefit something like this would have for that particular organization. Looking at something in terms of demand forecasting, we're looking at the Port of Los Angeles in this example, essentially by kind of predicting container shipping volumes, they were able to optimize resource allocation. So essentially allow crane and labor capacity to be fully maximized. And then if we're looking at a predictive maintenance example, Rolls-Royce, and we're very grateful that they look after the aircraft engines so well when we're flying on them. But essentially, they use real-time data and analyzing data helps them predict engine health and essentially facilitates, the maintenance plans and reduces unplanned events. So that's just a touch point on some of the practicality points of how data can be utilized. But we need to now then look at this. How does this apply to stack date? So, essentially a stack date signifies the scheduled time in which a container is loaded into a vessel. It's either shifted within the terminal or is available for dispatch or onward transportation at a very high level. And essentially, stack dates themselves have many impact points from inventory management through to compliance and regulations, reduced holding costs. It even has a space to play in utilization of the actual port itself. So this just gives us a sense of, what stack dates are and the importance of it. So stack dates are very, very strongly linked to the ability to understand when vessels are going to arrive. And we need to be able to understand the problem in a little bit. So using data, and we've looked at a particular port over a month, and we can essentially, on the left-hand graph here, on the x-axis, we have planned days to berth, and on the y-axis, we have actual days to berth. And you can see that if I had to take this very easy one to distinguish, this orange graph at the top, this particular vessel's planned days to berth was, when we first received that plan, it was 10 days out. But if we had to look at where it actually berthed and when it did, it was 25 days. So that's a 15-day delay, 2 weeks from that original kind of estimation. And you can just see that as these plans are updated, there's various movements along these vessels, and it just shows how much the actual shift, how much of the shift of the planning occurs. So you can clearly see here that if you are planning to move goods through a port and you want to use these facilities, you really need to have a clear understanding of when these vessels are going to arrive, when the stack dates are going to be firmed. And another way of articulating this is, if you look at the right-hand graph here slightly, is that we can see that in these examples highlighted in red that are ringed off here, where you've got your actual days to berth is happening around 6 days. This was, being planned at a 3-day level. So you've almost got a double the length of time and when some of these events are occurring. So the variability just creates unpredictability, and that essentially affects planning in the industry. So looking at how do we start understanding this and solving this challenge, we need to look at what data sources we're wanting to use and what variables are going to be explored. So we need to know what is the current stack date of vessel arrival schedule that is being planned and produced. Where's that vessel now in its current position? If it's supposed to be arriving in Cape Town the next day, but it's still showing off to be off the north coast of Mozambique, is it realistic that it's going to be in that time? What is the current port's performance looking at? The vessels that are in that port vicinity, are their anchorage times and berthing times at the moment in line with historical trends, or are they deviating slightly to showing that they might be delayed, which will affect the actual stack date for your particular vessel? What are the historical patterns that we might be looking at? And obviously we know that weather plays a big role in these port facilities. So looking and understanding the impact of weather, the wind conditions, and the forecast essentially allows us to understand the various metrics and influences when we're trying to look at predicting a certain element. So And I think it's an important thing to note that as we go on this journey and as things evolve, unidentified variables are always going to be uncovered, and you're always going to need to be able to compensate for them when you're looking at this. So just looking at how we've approached this in the predictive modeling aspect a little bit. So essentially, we're using a linear regression model, and that's essentially a statistical tool that allows us to manage and quantify the relationship between variables. And then a key component, given the live nature of the operations, is that we also apply an incremental learning, which is, we would have heard the term machine learning, but essentially is as new data becomes available, how do we update our current model in real time? So that gives us the framework in which the modeling works. And then essentially, we also want to know when anything unusual happens or something strange within the data set is detected. And that's essentially where we start using anomaly detection in our modeling. So if we had a look at a specific vessel in this graph here, and we can see that in the ideal world, we'd want to be tracking on this gray line. And often, as it is the case in the real world, and the difference between theory is that it doesn't often kind of meet. And we need to be practical in our application, and where we can see that when the planned days to berth for this particular vehicle was around 7 days, it actually arrived around 17.5 days later. So how do we move closer? And by applying our model and using natural predictions, we start tracking along this line that we start seeing in red. So as the further out the vessel is, obviously there's a lot more factors to take into consideration, and the closer we get to the event, the more consolidated that prediction becomes. But it's important to note that it really is a complex task, and there's a number of factors that can influence it. So you're going to have uncertain external factors that are always going to affect your model. So that could be political unrest, it could be striking, for example. In the supply chain and the transport industry, there's a lot of complex interdependencies. So that is very complex and difficult to account for. Your information and your model is also always going to be as good as the quality of the data that you put into the system and the availability of that. And then as the model progresses and the environment changes, you get this idea of concept drift. So essentially, as the model moves along, things change, and you need to be continuously reevaluating it and ensure that you're moving along the path towards creating a robust model that is accurate. So obviously, we want to go back to how do we tie data to creating real world impacts and benefits for various entities. And there's, given all the touch points that Ctrack have on various elements, I've picked up one or two here that I think it really just highlights where some of the benefits are. So, minimize demurrage charges. So the more accurate Ctrack can be, it ultimately just relates to a significant reduction in demurrage charges. And I think we've all been well aware of people that have had significant and bad experiences around this. And any kind of improvement there is ultimately going to just directly impact the bottom line of any kind of or any organization. Looking at just a larger financial impact, if you're looking at reduced storage costs, you are then optimizing your truck scheduling. So are you going to the port at the right time? Are you using the right corridor? You're linking that with the demurrage charges that are occurring. You're going to start seeing a total cost reduction, but you're not only going to be seeing that, you're going to actually see an overall increase in your supply chain efficiency. And another critical thing, given the roles that a lot of organizations have in terms of this, is that we're moving goods for people, is that we need to be able to really manage our customer expectations. And we know that having a happy customer, it goes a long way. So being able to use prediction models like this essentially allows us to have a better sense of when these deliveries are going to be on time, and that just turns and creates better customer satisfaction rates and better repeat business. So just coming to a conclusion, essentially is that in transportation, the practical use of data is a transformative force, and given the complex environments we operate in, it allows us to navigate that. And you know, as we harness the various potential that data enables us, we will start seeing the benefits in streamlined logistics operations, refining processes, and predicting certain elements of uncertainty. And I know, just given the key aspects that people have highlighted throughout this whole forum, you know, I really just want to urge everybody to explore these various avenues and hopefully start leveraging the power of data to just unlock, you know, a smarter future. And yeah, the journey starts now. So I think that's it from me, Harry, to conclude there. And yeah, once again, thank you to everybody's time and the opportunity to just share these thoughts with you.
Kelly, thank you so much. These are very good thoughts. I think quite scary to think about, you know, one should understand your problem, and without data, you won't be able to understand it. And also scary is if you don't know about the unidentified variables to be uncovered. You know, I think then you're in quite trouble. So the predictive modeling, which is a complex task, I think they need the professionals to help people to do this. So thank you very much for this. We really appreciate that. So ladies and gents, what we're going to do now, let me just put up our program quickly. Great context is that we're going to have a panel discussion of questions and answers now. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask all our presenters to switch on their cameras and to unmute both, so that they move up on the list, and then we can put them into the panel. And then we're going to ask you to, when you want to ask a question, you can either raise your hand or you can unmute yourself, and I'll pick it up in a list. And then when I recognize you, you can then ask your question. So let me just quickly then put up our panelists. Just bear with me. Doesn't seem to me have Eugene anymore. Is Gavin on there? Gavin, can you please switch on your camera and unmute? And there we go. We have everybody. I think we've got everybody except for Jean. It seems to me Jean is not with us anymore. All right, ladies and gents, the people on YouTube, you're also welcome to use the live chat function to post questions. I don't think there are any questions on this stage in the chat room. So if you want to ask a question, raise your hand or unmute and I'll recognize you. But while people are thinking about this, you know, I'm thinking now, if I can ask a question to the panel, and that is, you know, one is obviously, you know, scared, you know, out of your socks and say, okay, do I really know what's going on out there? You know, now we're going to get about knowing what to do and where to start. You know, who can help me to do this? And typically, I was thinking maybe, you know, an organization like Ctrack obviously would be able to help us. It's a pity Jean is not here, but what's the way to go about? Is it wise to go for a consulting route, or how should one go about in, you know, positioning yourself in this space?
If I may just jump in there, Harry, I think that in most of these instances, it comes down to asking the question, what business problem are you trying to solve? That's the start of everything. Because unless you understand what business problem you're trying to solve, you don't know even where to start. So it's important to pick that up. And then what I would say, secondly, from that is that once you identify what problem you want to solve, you need to start from what you've got. So start from where you know, and then work out towards bringing in as much as you can to better ask the question on how to solve your business problem. And then a lot of businesses are struggling with this very notion of how do you deal with big data, lots of data. There's a lot of data that's available, lots of tools that are available, a lot of self-help BI tools, and you can really progress very far. But I think it comes down to the size of your organization. You know, if you're a small outfit, maybe 5 employees, there's a lot that you can do with Excel, I kid you not, but you'll find that you will soon hit a ceiling. In that as soon as you try to scale or make it bigger or bring more in, so the complexity of the data and the complexity of answering the question starts moving it away from what you can do on Excel. Then you might progress to something like other tools like Tableau or Power BI, which also help kind of intelligence tools, but then very quickly you end up in the space of, am I an IT company or am I actually a freight forwarding company? And do I have the skill sets to acquire data, manage data? Because unfortunately, when it comes to data and systems reporting and data, the output is purely based on the quality of the data coming in. So if you don't have your data well organized, well structured, it is going to produce rubbish on the outside. So, you know, if you are an entity looking to exploit data, you know, I think that there's multiple self-help options, but there are multiple scenarios where you have companies providing software as a service in the space. But you do need to get your hands around your data. That's the first thing, and organize it properly with the view to solving for a specific business problem. Otherwise, it can seem too big and too amorphous. And that's the first. Those would be a couple of steps that I would take.
Thank you, Jez. Well said. Thank you very much for that. All right. It seems to me people are not, I haven't got problems. Let me just see small comments here. Don't seem to be that people want to ask questions. Is it possible? There's Sandra Boyson. Sandra, you can ask your question. Oh, Chandra Boyson. Doesn't seem to me Chandra's microphone is working or whatever. Okay, it seemed to me there's nothing on YouTube. So, okay, it seems to me people are happy. So what we're going to do then is let's have some closing remarks from our panelists, and obviously giving a hand to our panelists. You know, I think we had a very fruitful day, and it's actually obviously learned me a lot. Definitely going to spend some time looking at a YouTube video of this session again and comparing my notes, and I've learned quite a lot. Thank you very much for excellent presentations. So let's start, you know, going down my list. Well, let's take Jace. Jace, can we have some closing remarks from you? Then we'll take Lisa and Jacob, and then we'll take Kelly, and then I'll have Gavin to close the session for us. So let's start with Jace. Jace, maybe some closing remarks from your side.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. I see Chandra has responded on the chat group, so I don't know if we're going to give her that opportunity.
Okay, let's see. And I have a question for Lisa. Should I email afterwards? Chandra, you're welcome to email afterwards. You're welcome, but so can you try and ask now, see if it works? There's something wrong with that microphone. Chandra, you're welcome to email afterwards. I'll make sure the question reaches Lisa. Let's have closing remarks then from Jace. Thank you very much, Jace.
Okay. Thank you, Harry. Thank you to the team and to everyone who has presented and those attending. I think I want to basically end off with where I ended off with my slide. And it ties in with what Lisa said. Data in itself is useless until you action it. You need to action data. You can action it within your own organization. But if I have to put on my patriotic South African hat, there is lots of challenges out there, very complex ones. using data is going to support us in that space. We need to increase our dialogue with all stakeholders to improve South Africa's output. But dialogue is one thing, action is where it comes down to. And that's the best thing you can do with data, is actually action it. And I look forward to seeing people putting data in action.
Indeed, thank you very much, Jace. All right, let's have Lisa. Lisa, closing comments from your side.
Yeah, Harry, I think just in light of your question and some of the comments, I just want to take a different spin. We haven't addressed SMMEs all that much, but I do want to encourage them. Data is not just for the big guys. You had the question, but I do think I just want to encourage everyone. Even if you just start small, start in-house, just get started. I think it really opens doors that you never would have considered. Even I personally just like looking at data, playing around with it, seeing what happens, not always answering a question, but just getting a feel for it. So I really just want to encourage the SMMEs out there and also the big guys to just play around with it, get started. Don't wait until the next big hype before you start, or the next big crisis before you start. Get started now. I think that just start. That's my closing remark.
So true. Thank you very much, Lisa. Appreciate it. Jacob.
Thank you very much, Harry, and thank you to Jace and Lisa. I think expertly put, especially in terms of the SMMEs. As Gavin also said, that is the bulk of the players, at least in his industry, but also for SAAFF members, we have a critical mass of SMMEs and small guys. I think my closing remarks, they in a sense follows what Jace has said. And I think we are guided by many things in the industry, whether it be data, whether it be academic literature, trends, trade, business trends, whatever the case may be. These things, they give us a roadmap, so to speak, and they guide us. But I think, as Jace put it, we need to collaboratively tackle common problems and try to achieve common goals as a collective logistics and supply chain industry in South Africa. That's really my take of this session, as is my take with many of these expertly put together transport forums. It's that action, that implementation as a collective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Well said. Thank you very much for your time. Kelly.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, my closing remarks are very much aligned with Jace's own thoughts. So you can see we spend a lot of time discussing these types of things. But essentially, just to leverage that is that data is only going to deliver insights and value if you action it. And if you don't embed that into your operational daily practices, you're always going to struggle to work off that and actually leverage it. People are generally, unfortunately, inherently lazy in some instances. So we need to be able to create a framework in which to allow them to be able to utilize data effectively. And we've also got so much data coming at us that often we only need to manage things by exception. It's great to know things are going well, but we really want to know when things are going badly. And that is a powerful tool to just kind of disseminate some of the noise around data and just focus on some of the key elements that are really shouting out for attention. So, and just a closing note on that.
Thank you, Kevin. Much appreciated. I see Julia is unmuted. Julia, do you want to ask a question quickly? Okay, doesn't seem like it. Right, Gavin, can you please close the event for us? But from a Transport Forum side, we would like to thank SAAFF and RFA and Ctrack for hosting this event for us and putting this together. Really appreciate it. And a big hand to our great team of panelists. And ladies and gents, all of you will receive an email requesting some feedback. Please give us some feedback. We need your feedback for planning for future events and so on. And after Gavin has closed the session for us, I'm just going to play you the video of SAAFF again. But thank you, Gavin.
Thank you, Harry. You had given me 2 hours to wrap this up, hadn't you? Well, Folks, first of all, thank you very much to all the speakers. I know Harry has thanked you. I definitely learned a lot. I don't play in the data sphere. It's not my everyday task. But what we saw happening was in those presentations, I think opened the eyes of many people, definitely mine. So first of all, you have to know what's happening around you. You have to be collecting data, even if it's only on your company. But you need to collect data. You need to understand the pool in which you're playing. And you don't need to be drowning in that pool. There are many, many service providers out there that can help you, assist you in gathering that data. Many of our members have tracking devices on their vehicles. They're getting data every day. They're just not using it. So you need to that you are collecting data, that data is coming your way from various platforms, and you've got to decide how you're going to use that data. More importantly, you need to set your objectives, you need to understand where you're going, and you've got to use data to help you to get there. And I'm sure many of the speakers on this platform, definitely RFA, can give you some advice in terms of using data and where to go looking in terms of people who can help you with that. Don't be out in the dark. I think that's the most important thing, is don't sit out there in the dark. You need to know what's happening around you. Have a great day, guys. Thank you for listening to us. And Harry, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Gavin. Indeed, guys, take care and see you again soon. Thank you very much.
What does it take to compete on the world stage? To go head-to-head with the best of the best? Excellence, agility, resilience, the willingness to keep on evolving. It takes courageous leadership to be bold and chart the course, to connect the dots, bringing stakeholders together, to overcome the hurdles we all face, and to deliver best practice. It's about business at the click of a button, delivering at the speed of the internet, connecting people, products, and places, strengthening our supply chains, faster and more cost-effective than ever. Since 1921, we've given voice and vision to the freight forwarding industry, navigating the tides of international trade, evolving ever more sophisticated supply chains, bridging local and global markets to move our economy forward. Welcome to our world. The South African Association of Freight Forwarders, architects of transport for over a century.